Good afternoon, and welcome to the YMCA of Delaware's March 2023 Community Learning Conversation. My name is Terry Mullen, and I'm going to be your facilitator this afternoon. My pronouns are she and her. You all know it's Women's History Month. And in honor of this, today, in conjunction with the Alzheimer's Association Delaware Valley chapter, we are learning about the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's. Did you know that more than 6 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's, and 2/3 or 4 million are women? Moreover, more than 60% of Alzheimer's and dementia caregivers are women. Now, I believe we've all experienced some type of memory loss at times, like you walk into a room and then you can't remember what you went in there to get. So I know firsthand that this can be frustrating. But in this webinar, we're going to learn about the 10 common warning signs and what to watch for, how to approach someone about memory concerns, the benefits of a diagnosis, and some Alzheimer's Association resources. We're going to learn how these symptoms can affect daily life, your relationships, and your emotional well-being. Two of our YMCA of Delaware staff will also join us after the presentation from the Alzheimer's Association, and they're going to share their personal experience of taking care of their loved ones. I would like to first, though, acknowledge that this is a difficult topic to discuss with the stigma of the disease and personal and traumatic impact on our lives. So we ask that our panel guests please take care of your well-being and engage in a way that provides psychological safety for all. These are really, sensitive and personal stories that our guests are sharing. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest today. First, Judy Thalheimer. Judy is a volunteer speaker from the Alzheimer's Association. Peter Campbell. You can wave there. Peter Campbell. Peter is the Healthy Living Enrollment and Outreach Coordinator at the YMCA of Delaware. And last but certainly not least, Beverly Dennett. And Beverly is one of our Healthy Living coaches at the YMCA of Delaware. So Patty, does someone have a question? Is that okay? So I'd like to have each of our guests introduce themselves. Give us your name and your pronouns and your role and why you're here. So can we start with Judy?
Sure, thank you. My name is Judy Thalheimer. My day job is a registered dietitian and nutrition writer, but I also am a volunteer educator for the Delaware Valley chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. My grandmother and her brother and sister died of Alzheimer's. My mother is in late stages and her sister is in early stage. So I have quite a connection to this horrific disease.
All right, next up, Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter Campbell. I am the Healthy Living Enrollment and Outreach Coordinator for all of the Healthy Living programs that the YMCA of Delaware delivers. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I have a close connection because my mother about 3 weeks ago passed away from Alzheimer's, and her sister also has Alzheimer's but is still alive. And so I also, like Judy, I have a fairly strong connection to this and to caregiving for them.
Thank you, Peter. And now Beverly. You got Beverly? You're still muted. Got it? So we're having a little sound difficulty. Keep going. Okay. So Beverly's going to tell her story, hopefully if we get the sound working in a bit. But for now, I want to thank you all for joining us. And I'd like to introduce Judy, have her come back on the screen because she's going to spend some time sharing the 10 signs of Alzheimer's. Judy, why don't you take over from here?
Thank you very much. So a few housekeeping things first. This is the 30-minute version of the Alzheimer's Association's 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's and dementia. There is an hour-long version and a number of other wonderful presentations, and they are available at our e-learning link. My colleague, Kate King, is going to be dropping some links into the chat, and one of them will be that e-learning link. So if you'd like to see other presentations or the full hour of this, you're welcome to. Also, post-presentation, you should be receiving an email with a number of PDFs. One is the slides from this presentation, and the others I'll be referring you to as I go through. So you will receive the 10 warning signs and the roadmap that I'll be discussing as a PDF after, if you've supplied your email. So thank you all so much for being here today for this important topic. You know, as Terry said, this is Women's History Month, so we wanted to just highlight a little bit. First of all, as she said, women are more likely to get Alzheimer's disease than men, and more than 2/3 of Alzheimer's and dementia caregivers are women. About 1 in 3 caregivers are age 65 and older, and over half of primary caregivers take care of their parents. More specifically, over 1/3 of dementia caregivers are daughters, and approximately 1/4 of dementia caregivers are actually the sandwich generation, which means they're not only caring for an aging parent, and they're also caring for their children. It's critical that we educate each other about the disproportionate impact of this disease on women and recognize the strength of all caregivers as a force to address and create change around issues such as Alzheimer's disease. I'm going to share my screen now so you can watch the presentation. At that time, I'm going to turn my camera off so you can focus on the slides and the sound of my voice. And I suggest that you please turn your cameras off as well. You can see the stop video in the lower left corner. So here we are. You should all be able to see the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's disease. I will now try to stop my video without closing that. There we go. Okay. Let's get started. Our learning objectives for today are for you to be able to know the difference between typical age-related changes and Alzheimer's or another dementia. We'll be going over common warning signs of Alzheimer's and dementia, discuss tips for approaching someone if you have concerns about their memory or about your own, explain the importance of early detection and the benefits of diagnosis. There really is a reason that you want to find out as soon as possible, and we'll be talking about that. We will go briefly over some possible tests and assessments for the diagnostic process, and then I will give you information on some of the wonderful resources that have helped me so much from the Alzheimer's Association. So you may have heard the terms Alzheimer's and dementia used interchangeably. While they are related, there are significant differences between the two. Let's hear about this from some dementia and association experts. We're going to start with Dr. Heather Snyder to tell us about dementia.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow in the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual, but there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
Now we'll have Dr. Maria Carrillo explain what the disease is and what it looks like in the brain.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alzheimer described specific changes in the brain, what we now call the formation of plaques and tangles. Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and impacts memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has 3 main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to brain tissue loss and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's, such as memory loss, behavioral issues, problems with thinking, planning, and at the end stage, swallowing.
Now, Dr. Ruth Drew, the Director of Information and Support Services at the Alzheimer's Association, will talk about the importance of recognizing the warning signs of Alzheimer's.
It's important to know what the warning signs of Alzheimer's are and to be on the lookout. We know that we change over time, and the warning signs of Alzheimer's can be warning signs of a number of things. But when you see those in yourself or in someone you care about, it's important to check it out, to consult with a doctor, to find out what you're dealing with. Some of the things that can look like Alzheimer's may be other treatable conditions. If it is Alzheimer's, you still want to know as early as possible, because that gives the person and the family time to plan, time to make decisions, and it also gives the person with the disease a voice and allows them to say what they want.
So the Alzheimer's Association has developed a list of 10 warning signs. It's important to note that this list does not constitute a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or dementia. These are simply the most common examples of changes experienced. Individuals may experience one or more of these signs in different degrees, and perhaps even at different times of day or in different situations. As I mentioned, you'll be receiving an email with handouts. There is a worksheet with each of these 10 signs and a place for you to make notes if you've noticed them or you want to note something about them. So let's just dive in and learn about these signs. One of the most common signs of Alzheimer's, especially early on, is forgetting recently learned information. Others include forgetting important dates or events, repeatedly asking the same questions, and increasingly relying on memory aids or leaning on others for things or tasks once handled on their own. A typical age-related change, on the other hand, would be sometimes forgetting information, but remembering it later. That's key. Challenge in planning or solving problems. Some people may experience new difficulties in what's called executive functioning, including developing or following a plan, or they may have difficulty concentrating. So a more typical age-related change is making occasional errors when managing bills or household finances. That's going to happen. Let's hear from John.
I was probably spending 4 to 5 times more time preparing for something than I did, say, 5 or 10 years ago, because of the I would lose my thought, I'd lose my focus, I'd get anxious, I wouldn't get to sleep. I was thinking of this, I was in my sleep, I was thinking about what I was anxious about, which was what I was trying to remember, which was I was trying to prepare, which I was trying to do. So it was a really a vicious circle of, so I was able to control it a lot, so that people wouldn't see things and there weren't things to be seen. It's what was disturbing me was what effort I had to put into to do the things I used to do more easily.
So the third sign is difficulty completing familiar tasks. We all have trouble with technology that we didn't grow up with. People may need help using the remote or the microwave, and that's normal. That just comes from getting older and more out of touch, I suppose. Let's let Ruth tell us about the Alzheimer's situation.
Some people have difficulty with math or with reading in a way that's unusual to them. And once again, this is a change in that person. So for example, we all know somebody who was never able to balance their checkbook, right? So that wouldn't be a warning sign for them. But if somebody who always balanced their checkbook to the penny suddenly was paying bills, the same bill over and over, and not able to balance their finances, well, that would be a sign for them.
Individuals with Alzheimer's or dementia may have confusion with time or place. They might lose track of dates, seasons, or the passage of time. They may have trouble understanding something if it's not currently happening, or become confused about where they are or how they got there. This can become more dramatic or profound in the middle and late stages. A more typical age-related change would be getting confused about what day it is or when a scheduled appointment is, but figuring it out later. Let's listen to Ruth talk about trouble and understanding visual images and spatial relationships.
Alzheimer's disease is not just a disease of memory. It can affect other things too. It can affect the way that we perceive what we see. So sometimes somebody in the early stages of Alzheimer's might go to the eye doctor because they're having trouble seeing. And in fact, their vision is just fine, but the way they're perceiving what they're seeing may be difficult.
New problems with words in speaking or writing is the sixth possible sign. Individuals may have trouble following or joining a conversation, stop in the middle of a conversation and forget what they were talking about, or continuously repeat themselves. They might also struggle with finding the right word or calling things by the wrong name. They may start using more descriptive terms to talk about something rather than the name of the actual item because they can't come up with that. Now, this is something that we all worry about because everybody forgets a word sometimes, but that is a normal age-related change. This is something more. Let's hear from Phil.
The other thing that I've increasingly been struggling with the words, which I've dealt with words my entire life, you know, as an avid reader, as a reporter, as a writer. I struggle with them now.
Sign 7 is misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps. So if you lose something, but when you find it, you remember, oh yeah, I remember putting it here. That's normal aging. But losing that ability to misplace your steps and having no recollection that you may be the one who put this here is a sign of dementia. Let's hear from Ruth again.
So some people wonder if, if they lose their keys or their glasses or their purse, is that a sign of Alzheimer's? And one thing that I would say about that is for most of us, we might misplace something, but then if we retrace our steps, we can usually find it. We can usually remember. For a person with Alzheimer's, sometimes they're not able to retrace their steps. Sometimes that memory is just gone. And so when they do find their keys next to the phone because they got interrupted by a phone call when they were coming in, they set their keys down in an unusual space. So there they are next to the phone. If that happened to you or me, we'd probably remember, oh yeah, the phone was ringing when I came in the door. I put down my keys. The person with Alzheimer's might not remember. They might wonder who's moving their keys around because they never put their keys by the phone. So that's just a little bit of a difference in some of the dynamics with losing things in Alzheimer's.
Because of the lack of executive function and awareness, the person may grow increasingly suspicious of others and start accusing them of stealing, and do so more frequently over time. Let's take a look at number 8, decreased or poor judgment. Individuals may experience changes in judgment or decision-making, such as using poor judgment when dealing with money or paying less attention to hygiene and grooming. This leaves them really susceptible to being taken advantage of financially. This can be especially common in individuals who live alone. Making a bad decision once in a while, such as forgetting to get an oil change, is a more typical age-related change.
The way I kept my house, and all of a sudden, everything was okay with me. It's like, oh, it's a pile, I'm tired. So my dining room table usually looked like it was someone's office, because I always would say I would do it tomorrow. And then my bedroom, as far as clothing, I would just put it in a corner, put it in a chair. And all of this is just, I wouldn't say it looked like I was a pet rat, but really I was, because I never threw anything away. I always would say, I'll get to it, but I never did get to it. So just the way of my standard of living, it was actually decreasing.
The ninth possible sign is withdrawal from work or social activities. Let's hear from Dr. Salloway, who is a leading Alzheimer's and dementia researcher.
One of the most common changes and early on is the person's comfort zone shrinks a little bit, and then that gets worse throughout the course of the illness. So they're less comfortable going out, they're less motivated to do things than they were in the past. So there's some change in day-to-day functioning that way. I think people also lose confidence in their cognitive abilities because they may not recognize someone or know their name or find the right word, and they'll feel awkward, and they don't want people to notice that, so they feel more comfortable at home or in situations with family where they're very, very comfortable with that wouldn't concern them. So people tend to withdraw a little bit and be less outgoing. That's can be one of the early signs of Alzheimer's.
And the 10th sign is changes in mood and personality. Individuals with Alzheimer's or another dementia may become confused, suspicious, depressed, fearful, or anxious. They might get easily upset, either at home or especially when they're out of their comfort zone. As we age, however, it's normal to develop very specific ways of doing things and become upset or irritated when our routine is disrupted. Someone with Alzheimer's or dementia may become fearful, angry, or easily frustrated, which is something that should be addressed.
Another early sign of Alzheimer's or dementia is subtle changes in behavior. So all of a sudden, the family may notice the person is more easily irritated or more impatient or a little moody or have a shorter fuse or more anxious. Now, there's lots of things that can cause that, but often that can be an early symptom of Alzheimer's or go along with the early symptoms of memory loss.
So those are the 10 signs. If you notice any of these signs in yourself or someone else, it's important to take action. Any change that's unusual for your level of functioning or that of someone around you is cause for concern. So let's move on to the next module, the importance of early detection. Why would it be important to detect this early? Let's hear from Dr. Salloway again.
You know, it's a very interesting phenomenon that people who have memory problems are often less aware of it than family members or their friends who know them well. One of the reasons for that is our ability to monitor ourselves, which is an important part of brain function, decreases when we start having memory problems. Not in everybody, but commonly, and more than half the people with memory problems. And so the person is just not keeping track of the trouble they're having day to day. But the family members are, paying attention. If they're paying attention, they see, boy, this is starting to happen a lot. And the person's not aware of it. So the family's more aware, and they may talk to their loved one about it. And they say, I've noticed you've been repeating yourself. They say, I'm not repeating myself. And that could either be due to the fact that they're not aware of it, or they may not want to acknowledge it.
Friends and family are often the first to notice the changes. Let's see what Mary noticed.
I was all adamant about what was happening to Daryl. I wasn't sure. I didn't know. And this wasn't the person that I know. This wasn't the person. Daryl was my husband was very, he always had to be building or designing or working with his hands. And it was getting to the point where he wasn't, and he was becoming very frustrated when he was forgetting to do things or go places.
The Alzheimer's Association has developed a roadmap of 10 helpful steps to help make addressing memory concerns less daunting and more productive. You will be receiving a handout that includes these steps. It's a worksheet for going through the steps. First, you assess the situation. What changes in memory, thinking, or behavior do you see? Step 2, what else is going on? Various conditions can cause changes in memory, thinking, and behavior. Are there other health or lifestyle issues that could be contributing to these changes? Stress, diabetes, a new medication? Could they have sleep apnea? It could even be a brain tumor, so it may not be Alzheimer's. Step 3, learn about the signs and the benefits of early diagnosis. You've got this one covered. You're doing it right now. So let's move on to step 4. Has anyone else noticed the changes? Talk with friends and family. What, if any, changes have they noticed? Next, you need to prepare to have a conversation. Who should be the one to discuss concerns with the person? It could be you, a trusted family member or friend, or a combination. It's usually best to speak one-on-one so that the person doesn't feel threatened or ambushed, but use what you know about the person to judge what approach might be best. What is the best time and place to have the conversation? It's important to have this conversation as soon as possible. In addition to identifying a date and time, you should also consider where the person will feel the most comfortable. So what will you say? You may want to build out somewhat of a script for getting started. Consider the following questions. I've noticed this change in you and I'm concerned. Have you noticed this? Are you worried? How have you been feeling lately? You haven't seemed like yourself. Or, I noticed you, insert specific example, and it worried me. Has anything else like that happened? Then offer to go with the person to the doctor. Ask the person to see a doctor and offer to accompany them. Try using encouraging words such as, there are lots of things that could be causing this. Let's see if the doctor can help us figure out what's going on. Or, the sooner we know what's causing these problems, the sooner we can address it. Or even, I think it would give us both peace of mind if we talked to a doctor. If needed, have multiple conversations. Don't be discouraged if the first conversation is not as successful as you'd hoped. Write down notes about how it went so you can prepare for any future conversations. Please don't dismiss the changes you're noticing simply because it's hard to talk about or the person is reluctant to address them. The conversation didn't go as planned. Just keep trying. Next, reach out for support. You can turn to the Alzheimer's Association. They have a free 24/7 helpline. You're not talking to a volunteer when you call, you're talking to a master's level clinician who can provide reliable support and information 24 hours a day, including about how to have this important conversation. And I will mention this again at the end of the presentation. Finally, see a doctor. Many people address concerns about memory, thinking, and behavior with their primary care physician first. However, in some cases, the primary care physician may refer the person to a specialist for further evaluation. So it could be a geriatrician who's someone with special training in dealing with problems that come up in adults generally over age 65. There's a neurologist who specializes in diseases of the brain and nervous system. It's important to note that not all neurologists specialize in Alzheimer's and other dementias, so you need to look for one who does. A neuropsychologist, that's someone who can address, diagnose, and treat psychological disorders associated with brain-based conditions. Also, psychiatrists and psychologists may be involved. We know what signs to look for and how to approach the conversation. Now let's discuss the benefits of early detection.
There are a number of benefits in early detection of Alzheimer's. For one thing, a person is able to have a voice in what happens next. They can make plans. They can live life more on their own terms. They can also make plans for the future, financial plans, care plans. They can let people know what they want, which can be a real gift later on. It also allows time for families to make plans and to make decisions about who can do what and figure out care and those kinds of issues. Some people are interested in clinical trials. Clinical trials allow people to have access to treatments that aren't available yet. And for some people, that can be a really important thing to pursue.
You will be receiving more information on how to get involved in clinical trials in that email that's coming post-presentation.
There are a number of benefits.
Sorry about that. Now we're going to talk about seeking a diagnosis now that we understand why it's so important to do so. We're going to start with a little quiz. So there will be a poll that should be popping up on your screen where you can input your answer to this question: true or false? There is currently no way to diagnose Alzheimer's disease. Let's see, is that poll open? There we go. True or false? No way to diagnose Alzheimer's disease. I see results are coming in. All right, we have 61% of people have responded. I'll give you a few more seconds. They're still coming in. Thank you. What do you think? True or false? Okay, we're going to hold it there. Right now, we have 68% of participants think that is false, and 32% think it's true. So since the majority say false, I'm going to hit false. That is correct. There are actually a number of assessments and tests that make it possible for healthcare professionals to diagnose Alzheimer's with a high degree of certainty. I remember, and you probably do too, the days that you had to wait for autopsy in order to find out if someone had had Alzheimer's disease. That's why it's important to have this question in here, because that has changed fairly recently, and there are new diagnostic tools coming out all the time. So this is now false. So what would an assessment look like? Well, definitely a medical history, a physical exam, could be a screen for depression, maybe interview with close companions. The doctor may order some lab tests to try to figure out what's going on, probably a mental cognitive status test where some questions are asked, and maybe brain imaging. It's rare that cerebrospinal fluid analysis is done, but it can be. That's one way of detecting the proteins associated with Alzheimer's disease in the brain. So many people wonder, do dementia-like symptoms always result in a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or another dementia? The diagnosis may be something other than Alzheimer's or another dementia, which is why it's important to investigate the cause of the symptoms. The diagnostic process will vary from person to person, depending on an individual's specific situation and what the doctor feels is the right course of action for that person. Stigma and misconceptions about Alzheimer's, like that nothing can be done, can deter some people from seeking a diagnosis. The Alzheimer's Association is in communities across the country, providing direct service to individuals and families facing this disease. As I mentioned, there's this 24/7 helpline, 800-272-3900. Write it down, hang it on the fridge, 800-272-3900, 24/7, available in multiple languages. They have translators standing by if they don't have someone answering at the time. And again, these are master's level clinicians who are answering the phone. No question is too big or too small. I have had personal experience with them, and they are wonderful.
I've had a couple of phone calls that I've been able to make in to the call center. When I've had a couple of quick questions that I wanted to ask. You know, there's been a couple of nights, 2 o'clock in the morning, you have questions, you have anxieties, and I was struggling dealing with them, and it's amazing. It was one of the best things I ever did, was keeping the call center on my favorites now. Just to know that there's somebody you can call who is aware of what you're going through.
The Alzheimer's Association has a tremendous amount of information online. on all different topics concerning Alzheimer's and dementia at alz.org. Let's hear Teresa's experience.
When I went to the Alzheimer's Association website, which is alz.org, there I was trying to find out more about what was Alzheimer's, what really is this disease, what is younger onset Alzheimer's, what is dementia, is there a cure, how long has this been around, how many people are affected by this, where can I go for resources, where can I go for help, what do I do with this? How can I handle this? Is there more people like me out there? Is there someone that I can talk to if I need to? And there I found the support line that's 24 hours a day. And there I found where I can go for workshops, where I can go and read things and postings that people have done, where I can find out what events is happening in the Alzheimer's Association, where I can see how it's affecting people around the globe.
So links to these things and information on the helpline will be dropped into the chat by Kate King. So thank you, Kate. There's also these, I mean, there are so many resources. These are just 3 that we've chosen to include here. Alzheimers.org/CRF, that stands for Community Resource Finder. So this is put together in conjunction with the AARP, and it can help you find resources in your area, whether it's where you can go for a support group or finding an elder care lawyer, anything, or some home care or anything like that. You can check the CRF Community Resource Finder. So I hope that you have enjoyed this presentation, that it has given you valuable information, and that it has been clear and helpful. You should have the links to more help, but I'd like to leave time for some questions and the panel discussion. I'm going to turn it back over. I will stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Judy. That was very informative. And I just want to reiterate that Judy is going to send out the handouts and a PDF of the presentation. So what can be more helpful than having all those resources written down so we don't have to remember them, right? So we'll all have access to that really important information. So now I'd like to invite Peter and Beverly to the screen. I want to thank you both for being here and agreeing to share your personal experiences with us. I would like each of to share their story and to answer a question. So, but before you do, I just want to remind our listeners and presenters that this session is being recorded so it can be shared going forward for all to learn, which is awesome. For the audiences, if you have questions, please post them in the Q&A session, and we'll do our best to answer your questions either in the webinar or if we run out of time as a follow-up to you. So we're going to start with Peter. Peter, would you like to start by telling us your story? And then can you also share how you maintained your own emotional and physical well-being while caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's?
Yeah, thanks, Terry. My mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in May of 2020, right as the pandemic was starting to get into full throttle. We knew that she had some level of dementia, but we wanted to get the diagnosis so that it could open up resources to us. Resources that we really never wound up using because she was very high functioning. She relied on my dad for everything, and I lived with them during this time because they were in their 90s. And I was there in case anything would happen. In March of 2022, last year, in the middle of the night, my father fell and he broke his hip. As a result, the person that she relied upon exclusively for everything has now been transferred to a hospital, and she became even more confused. And we just had to start to manage her efforts throughout his rehabilitation. When he came back to the house to join her, he had what I think Bev will soon describe as anesthesia Alzheimer's. He was very much confused all of the time. So I was dealing with 2 people who had huge levels of confusion, one who already had a diagnosis, anesthesia, Alzheimer's, I believe, was going to wear off, and he would return more to his normal self. But I started to go a little crazy because I wasn't able to handle both two people in this kind of condition. We got some help. Help came in. They came from like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. That's great. But the critical times are when they wake up and when they go to bed. And I had the person who had come in help more on the getting them to bed. Ultimately, my mother passed away from Alzheimer's, and something that is on her death certificate, which says failure to thrive. And that was very clear as her end came. What I did for myself to answer that question that you presented, Terry, was I went to the why. I worked out. I made sure that I kept my physical body going. I watched what I ate. I watched what I drank. I was careful. Let's not drink a lot of alcohol because it's a depressant, and that would just make the issue more difficult for me to handle. But the YMCA was a great resource for community, for classes, for the fitness center, for everything. To help keep that balance going in my life. So I think that sort of concludes what I was going to say about all of that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Peter, for sharing that very personal story and how the why has been important, to help you maintain your strength through all of this, because it is tough for the caregiver. Thank you very much again. So now we all have to cross our fingers and hope that technology is working. And Beverly, we're going to see if we've got some sound here. Would you be able to tell your story? Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't look like it. No, it's not working. So, technology is a double-edged sword. It's wonderful that we're here and we're able to do this, but this is live, live from Bear Glasgow Y. And so sometimes, things happen. So, I just want to thank Beverly for committing to this. And, if you have questions for Beverly, we could post them, and maybe she can post some things in the chat box, or we can send some things along when Judy sends back the information. So thank you again, Beverly. I thank you for being here and for committing to this. All right, last but certainly not least, Judy, can you share some of the external resources and how to communicate with someone with Alzheimer's?
Well, as I said in my introduction, Alzheimer's runs in my family very strongly. We tend to start around 65 and then live into our 80s with it. But it's not really much of a life in the last decade. So, my sister and brother and I live with this constant, how many good years do I have left? Am I next? So that's something that we need to deal with. And my approach is to get involved. So, excuse me. There are so many ways to get involved. I chose to become a community educator because I really love educating, and it's something that I do as part of my job. You can be an advocate. We actually got an email today. They're sending people down to Washington to sit in the committee room when the hearings are going on about healthcare, and they're looking for volunteers who want to go down there and be present and be visible to lawmakers. You can be involved in clinical trials as a healthy individual. It's another great way to get involved. And of course, donating and attending your local walk are great ways to help. As far as communicating, this is something I'm really glad you asked, because this is something very important to me. I often see people my age talking to their parents who have, early dementia or early Alzheimer's, and correcting them. No, Mom, don't you remember? It was XYZ. This just makes the person embarrassed and frustrated because they don't remember it was XYZ. And it's so tempting to correct them. And I remember my dad saying, I just feel like if I tell her the right thing enough times, she'll get it. And it really doesn't work. So, and I can see Bev is like, yeah, I've experienced that. You need to meet the person where they are. And one example is my aunt started having delusions, which is something that my mother didn't have. She would have lucid dreams and she would believe them more than what she saw in her daily life. These were so vivid. So she believed that her daughter, who was being absolutely incredible and doing everything she could to handle her mother's situation and, you know, make everything as easy as possible, she began believing that her daughter was really evil and was doing all these horrible, bizarre things, shoving hot compresses up her nose, and that's why her nose is running. I mean, things that couldn't even possibly be real, putting hot things under the tires and blowing the car up. So we kept saying, oh no, your daughter would never do that. And here are all the things that Stephanie's doing for you, and she would never do that. Finally, I tried something different. I said, I am so sorry to hear that. If she's really doing these things, you must be so worried about her. We will help her get the help she needs. And that completely disarmed my aunt, because there was no connection with reality, because a real mother would have been worried about her daughter, but this was the dementia talking. She wasn't actually worried that her daughter was doing these things. So when I responded in that way, it disarmed her. It shut down the loop of this constant, this is what she did, this is what she did. I'm so sorry, we will help her get help. So that is something that I wanted to share.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Judy. So we definitely don't want to forget about the Q&A part, right? Especially not on an Alzheimer's webinar. We cannot forget about that. So checking the chat box. And if you have questions, please put them in now. I see we do have one question for Judy. So Judy, this is coming from YMCA staff, and you know, we do get to know our members pretty well. So if we see somebody coming into the Y and maybe acting differently, or just talking, you know, differently, or you know, in some of the things that you're saying, how do we approach their family member? How would you suggest that?
Okay, and I'm going to see if my colleague Kate King wants to weigh on this. You know, when I always think about the audience I'm presenting to, and I thought that question might come up, I don't have a good answer for it. If you know the family members, if they are also members and come in and you can talk to them, that would be a really good place to start, but it's probably the vast minority of the time. I think just expressing caring for the person. How are you today? You know, how are things going? Maybe you can get them to open up a bit. If they have concerns, you could then direct them for help. Kate, do you have any thoughts on this?
I agree completely, Judy. I think what you had mentioned in terms of just being very knowledgeable in terms of the person's quote unquote regular behavior and how that they would usually present, if they're anytime they're with someone, be able to see if this is something that you can feel comfortable bringing up to them. And then but yes, I agree exactly with what you said in terms of being able to be just as supportive and open and not judging and not making the person feel as though they are like passing judgment or making them feel bad about their behavior or how they are speaking.
Yeah, and I would like to add, there is such a stigma. First of all, people sometimes try to hide this. You heard one of the video speakers say, you know, he tried to hide it. So if they are aware of the problem, which people aren't always, if they are aware of the problem, they may be quite embarrassed to have someone else notice. And if they aren't aware of the problem, they will deny that there's a problem because their brain is making sense of the world for them. So I think that, again, we're in agreement. Just speak to them when you see them, spend some time with them. Maybe they'll start feeling comfortable and opening up to you. I don't know if you would feel it's appropriate. This would be more of a question for the Y to ask if there's a family member that they could speak to. They may be willing to connect you to somebody. Oh, you know, oh, we were talking about your daughter. I would love to, you know, I would love to speak to your daughter. It's been such a pleasure knowing you. And maybe they'll say, sure, here's, you know, here's her email, or, you know, those are the only suggestions I have.
No, thank you. Thank you. Those are good suggestions. And I think, you know, we get to know our members really well and we care about them. And this is all stemming from the fact that we care. So I have a question for Peter, and it might be hard for you, Peter. So were you scared or fearful about taking care of both your parents? And then looking back, how do you wish it could have gone differently?
It was a daunting task. It was more how I viewed it. Basically, how to manage the efforts of two people who were not necessarily able to make rational decisions, and who they would one of the things that you'll notice in people who have Alzheimer's is this constant repeating themselves, and it gets you crazy when you're a caregiver. You hear the question over and over again. It's kind of difficult to handle it. I wasn't really fearful. It was just a matter of, this is a big task at hand. Let's try to find ways to manage this, which is when I got my brother involved, and he was a big support. And also getting some outside care to come in and literally help them with day-to-day tasks. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, that would be how you would have done things differently, correct?
Well, no, that's how we actually did do things.
Yeah. Okay.
There, in terms of would I have done something different? I honestly, no, I don't think there was much that I would have done that was different. The purpose of me being with them through their last days and living with them was designed so that they could be as independent as possible in their own house, rather than having them go to an assisted living that became a health center. That is where they wound up going in the last year. And my father is still there. So it is, he would not be able to come back now that she has passed. She is the one that had the Alzheimer's, he didn't, but his physical health has made it such that it makes more sense for him to be there with 24-hour care than me, where I really don't have the capability to lift someone who falls onto the ground, which is what often happens.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question from an anonymous attendee. I have noticed my mother occasionally has memory lapses or difficulty doing things, preparing Christmas Eve dinner that used to be easier. However, she has been in treatment for a form of cancer for 6 years. Is chemo brain real, and could the treatment be the problem rather than dementia? How do treatments for other illnesses impact memory? This might be Judy or Kate.
Kate, I'm happy to give it a go.
Sure.
Okay.
That's a great question, and things that we get asked often. And I think that the best response would be, there's all different types of medication and all different types of diseases. And a lot of the time it depends on the person's background. It depends on what they're taking. It depends on a lot of different factors. And a lot of the times we tell people to ask their medical provider, because they would know their history of their patient and be able to better determine if it's specific to a treatment for a specific ailment or a disease, or they'll be able to let them know if it's specific to dementia or the onset of Alzheimer's. So we usually tell people to refer back to their provider, because they have more of a comprehensive overlook of their information. And we also let people know that they can call the helpline to be able to talk to the consultants that might have more insight into those different questions.
Right. Thank you so much. And that helpline, 800-272-3900, is 24/7, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to move to another anonymous attendee. Not a question, but just wanted to thank you all for having such a dedication towards such a difficult topic. My grandmother passed away this past August, and she had Lewy body dementia. It was very hard to see her on a day-to-day basis, knowing that she was dealing with these issues. By listening to the personal stories and shared today, it made me feel like I was a part of the community I didn't even know was there. It made me feel not alone for once. Oh, wow, I got the chills on this one. Thank you all. That's awesome. I'm glad that really helped you. And I'm sorry you were all alone going through that.
Thank you. And that brings up the fact that the Alzheimer's Association runs support groups. And I strongly recommend. There are actually support groups for people with early stages, but most of them are for caregivers. Even if you're not living with the person and caring for them day to day, you can go to a support group and feel the community. And your local walk is such a wonderful place to feel the community. The one in Philadelphia is one of the largest, and it is just an amazing experience to be surrounded by thousands of people who know exactly what you're going through.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. Thank you. This is from Beverly. Beverly, awesome. So I'll read her story. The challenges for Beverly was having two parents with different needs and their inability to understand they have to wait for assistance, the unknown and no predictability of a day, and keeping them safe. My most effective strategy was balancing the two roles. She was a caregiver and also a daughter. I found balance by treating them with respect and dignity, having patience, listening and acknowledging I hear them, and last but not least, knowing the things they said and did were not the mom and dad who raised me. Thank you, Beverly. That's awesome. All right, so I have a question from Patty Bouquet. Any idea how to handle a person showing signs but is in denial and refuses to discuss it? My sister wants to hold group intervention, but it doesn't sound like that is a good idea based on the information provided today. Who wants to take that one? Judy? Kate?
I can, but I always defer to the association. So
Okay.
Kate, do you want to?
You can definitely speak to it, Judy, but as what Judy mentioned in her presentation, being aware that the first, second, maybe third time talking to a person, it might not resonate. It might not sink in that that person needs help. I would think one-on-one might be a bit more manageable because they might feel ganged up if there's a group of people, and especially if they're not noticing or not aware of their situation, it might be very overwhelming to them or frightful. But I do think that being kind and being firm in talking to a person is the best way to respect that individual, and knowing that it might take several times for a person, because as Judy had mentioned, there's stigma, and the person might be terrified that this might be happening to them and they don't understand and they don't know how to react. But knowing that people love them and that are willing to support them might make that a little bit easier to deal with.
I absolutely agree. The feeling of being ganged up on is something you want to avoid. Perhaps you and your sister, I think you said your sister, could sit down with her and appeal to her as a mother who cares about you. We are worried. We know that you aren't seeing these changes, but for us, can we go to the doctor and have an evaluation? We will feel better. It will put our minds at ease. That's a possible approach.
And it's so wonderful that you can have a diagnosis now. That's great information. So any more questions? We still have, I can have a little bit of time if you have more questions.
Well, I will add to that there are treatments that can slow the progression. So you want to get started early. So that's another thing. Hey, Mom, if there is something going on, we need to find out as soon as possible. And then we can get you on medication and get this, under control.
Right. We still have a little bit of time, but it looks like that's it for questions. But we got a great bunch of questions. Thank you so much. Definitely an engaged audience. So I do want to thank the Alzheimer's Association, Judy, Peter, and Beverly, again, for your time and your commitment to supporting and educating our why. We believe that by sharing our experiences and knowledge, we can create a more supportive and inclusive community, just like one of the listeners had said, and we collectively can cope with these challenges in our lives. So we are hosting just a community forum on April 19th at the Bear Glasgow Y, and that forum will gather together caregivers, agencies, legislators to learn more about the needs in our community. I believe it's 1 to 3, and there will be a flyer sent to you if your email is in this conversation, this webinar. So please join us. All are invited. At the Y of Delaware, we strive to create a culture of learning. All are welcome. Everybody belongs. Isn't that awesome? We serve our community best when we have compassion and knowledge to assist all people in need. So thank you all, and thank you for all you do for our community. Let's learn together and support each other along the way. Thank you.